You're standing in the showroom. The salesman is smiling at you. He keeps steering you toward the shiny one with the enormous glowing screen in the middle of the dashboard. And something in your gut, quiet but stubborn, is telling you to be careful. Trust that feeling, because after all my years with my head under the bonnet of other people's cars, I can tell you the vehicle that will strand you on the side of the road and drain your pension doing it is very often the one they push hardest. Here is what I found, and it stunned me. The most reliable car brands in this country are almost never the most advertised ones. And there is a very specific reason the dependable ones stay quiet while the troublesome ones fill your television with commercials. I want to take you all the way to the bottom of this, to a federal court decision in Australia in 2019 that involved tens of thousands of ordinary owners and one very common feature hidden inside cars that people bought in complete good faith. By the end, you'll know exactly what to look for and what to walk away from, using nothing but your own 2 eyes and a 5-minute check you can do this weekend on any car, in any yard. The moment it hit me was a Tuesday morning years back. A woman about my age rolled into the workshop in tears because her 3-year-old European hatchback wouldn't move out of the driveway, and the dealer had quoted her more to fix the gearbox than the car was now worth. 3 years old. And I remember thinking, that is not bad luck. That is a pattern. So I started keeping records. I started asking questions, and the trail led somewhere I did not expect. Let me start where every honest ranking has to start. At the very bottom. For most of my life, I believed what nearly everyone believes, that a dearer car is a better car, that if you spend more, you are buying peace of mind, that a luxury badge means it was built to last. I want you to let go of that idea right now, because in my logbooks it is simply not true, and the numbers back me up. The brands that gave my customers the most heartbreak, the most towing bills, the most nights sitting on hold with a service department were frequently the prestige ones. The big British 4-wheel drives with the plush leather, the Italian ones with the beautiful curves, the German ones with the badge that is supposed to mean engineering perfection. I watched these cars come back again and again, still under warranty, then just past it, with faults that cost thousands. There is data on this that the marketing people would rather you never saw. Every year, an outfit called Canstar Blue surveys thousands of real Australian owners and asks them plainly how satisfied they are and how much trouble their car has given them. The prestige European brands do not sit at the top of those lists. Not even close. The consumer group Choice, which takes no advertising money from anyone, has said the same thing for years. And the roadside people at the motoring clubs, the ones who actually get called out at 2 a.m, they see which badges keep them busiest. I'll be blunt about the worst of them, because you deserve names, not hints. The large luxury 4-wheel drives from certain British marques have a reputation among mechanics that is almost a running joke, except it isn't funny when it's your money. Electrical gremlins, air suspension that sinks overnight, warning lights that come on for no reason a computer can find. One of the big American brands that sells rugged-looking off-roaders here has spent years near the bottom of owner satisfaction surveys in this country, with owners reporting problem after problem in the first few years. Here's the part that got under my skin. The repair cost. When a common car breaks, parts are everywhere and any workshop can fix it. When a prestige car breaks, the part might have to come from overseas. The labor is specialized, and you are locked into the dealer's price. So the expensive car isn't just less reliable in many cases. It punishes you twice, once for breaking and once for being expensive to mend. So that solved one small mystery. Price does not equal reliability. If anything, past a certain point, they move in opposite directions. But that only made the bigger question louder in my mind. If it isn't the badge and it isn't the price, then what actually decides whether a car lasts 15 faithful years or dies at 4? Because the answer to that turned out to be hiding in a place almost nobody thinks to look. It's the gearbox. Now stay with me, because this is where my little hobby of keeping records turned into something that genuinely made me angry. I started sorting my repair jobs, not by brand, but by which part had failed, and one part kept rising to the top of the pile across many different makes: the transmission, the automatic gearbox, and not the old-fashioned kind, a newer kind. Let me give you the history, because it matters. For decades, the automatic transmission in a normal family car was what we call a torque converter automatic. It's a proven design. It's smooth, it's forgiving, and treated with basic care, it can run for hundreds of thousands of kilometers. My own workhorse ute had one that went past 300,000 without a complaint. But somewhere in the 2000s, the car makers went looking for ways to squeeze out slightly better fuel economy figures, partly to meet tightening emissions rules overseas, and they turned to two newer designs. One is called a dual-clutch transmission. The other is called a continuously variable transmission, a CVT. On paper, both save a sip of fuel. In the real world, in a lot of cars, both introduced a fragility that the old gearboxes never had. Here is the anchor I promised you, and it is real, and you can look it up. Ford sold a great many cars in Australia, fitted with a dual-clutch gearbox they marketed under the name PowerShift. Owners reported shuddering, lurching, hesitation, sudden loss of drive. It became one of the biggest consumer disputes in the history of the Australian car industry. It went all the way to the federal court. In 2019, Ford was penalized $10 million after the consumer regulator took action over how those complaints were handled, and a separate class action on behalf of tens of thousands of owners led to a settlement worth many millions of dollars in refunds and compensation. Tens of thousands of ordinary Australians, many of them retirees, sitting in cars that jerked and stalled through no fault of their own. And it wasn't only one brand. Volkswagen faced a huge saga over its dual-clutch gearboxes too, with recalls affecting well over 90,000 vehicles in this country, again after reports of sudden power loss. The consumer regulator was involved there as well. These were not rare lemons. These were designs fitted to hundreds of thousands of cars that behaved beautifully in a showroom and then betrayed people once the warranty clock was ticking. So now the picture was getting clearer and darker. The thing most likely to kill a modern car dead and cost you $5,000 or $10,000, or write the car off entirely, is a gearbox that was chosen not because it lasts, but because it looks good on a fuel economy sticker. Nobody put that on the brochure. Nobody at the dealership sat my customers down and explained the difference between a torque converter automatic and a dual clutch. They just sold the car and moved on. The second thing killing modern cars and quietly punishing older drivers especially is what I call the screen and sensor trap. Walk into any dealership today and count the buttons. You almost can't because they're vanishing. The climate control, the radio, sometimes even the demister, all buried inside a tablet, stuck to the dashboard. It looks modern, it photographs well, and it is a nightmare waiting to happen. Here's why it matters for reliability and for your wallet, not just your patience. Every one of those screens is a computer. Every sensor scattered around the car, the parking sensors, the lane cameras, the automatic braking radar, is another part that can fail. And when a physical button breaks, you replace a $2 switch. When a screen or a control module fails, you can be looking at hundreds or thousands of dollars, and it often can only be done by the dealer with their special software. I have seen a cracked or dead central screen effectively disable the air conditioning in an entire car because there was no knob left to fall back on. I'm not against safety technology. Automatic braking has genuinely saved lives, and I would never talk you out of it. But there is a difference between safety systems and gimmicks, and the industry has blurred that line on purpose, because complexity keeps you coming back to them. A car with 50 computer modules has 50 things that can throw a warning light, and every warning light is a reason to book you in and charge you a diagnostic fee just to plug in a scanner. And this is where the servicing side of it turns into a slow leak on your bank account. Many brands now tie you to their dealer network with servicing that must be done a very particular way to keep the warranty valid. Miss the exact schedule or use the wrong workshop, and they'll try to wriggle out. The good news, and I'll come back to this, is that some brands publish what's called capped price servicing, where they tell you up front what each service will cost. The brands that hide those numbers, in my experience, are the ones to be nervous about. Now, I know what you might be thinking right about now, and I want to answer it before it grows into a reason to click away. You might be thinking that all of this is fine for people with money to burn, or younger folks who love fiddling with technology, but that you're on a fixed income, you don't want a computer on wheels, and you just need something that starts every morning and doesn't rob you blind. I want you to hear me clearly. This next part is built for exactly you. Not for the enthusiast, not for the wealthy, for the person who wants dignity, independence, and a car that behaves. So here is the first thing you can do this week, and it costs you nothing. When you sit in any car you're considering, whether it's new or second-hand, reach for the temperature control and the radio volume without looking down. If your hand finds a real knob you can turn, that's a point in the car's favor, for your safety and for your future repair bills. If your hand finds nothing but smooth glass, be cautious. That single test, done with your fingers in 30 seconds, tells you more about how the car was designed to be lived with than any brochure ever will. That is the moment my suspicion turned into something firmer. And if you want to go even deeper into the thinking behind everything I'm about to share, I should tell you something before we continue. I've put the full framework I developed across those years of digging the checklists, the gearbox guide, the brand comparisons, everything into a series of digital books called First Moves, Deep Mastery, and the Senior System. They're written in plain language, built for people who want to walk into any dealership or yard with the kind of confidence that comes from actually knowing what you're looking at, not just hoping for the best. You'll find the details in the description below. But let's keep pulling that thread together right now, because the gearbox was only the first door, and the second thing, just as simple. Sit in the driver's seat and notice how your body feels getting in and out. For many of us, a car that sits a little higher, so you slide across rather than drop down and haul yourself up, saves your knees and your back every single day. A reliable car you dread climbing into is not the right car. Comfort and reliability together, that's the target, and you're allowed to demand both. Now let me pull all this together into the ranking you actually came for, because now you have the tools to understand why the order falls the way it does. At the very bottom, as I said, sit many of the prestige European brands and certain rugged American ones, dragged down not by bad driving but by electrical faults, complex components, and repair bills that make grown adults weep, beautiful to look at, costly to own. I would tell my own family to be extremely careful, especially buying one used and out of warranty, because you inherit every one of those expensive problems with none of the protection. A step up from the bottom sit the brands that built otherwise decent cars but saddled them with those troublesome gearboxes I described. This is a painful category, because some of these makers produce genuinely good engines and comfortable cabins, and then undo it all with a transmission that can't go the distance. The lesson here isn't to avoid the whole brand forever. It's to avoid the specific bad gearbox. And I'll tell you exactly how to do that in a moment, because it's the heart of everything I learned. Then we reach the middle, and this is where things get interesting and hopeful. The Korean brands, the ones many people of our generation once dismissed as cheap, have quietly climbed the reliability rankings over the last 15 years, and they've done something clever that helps you directly. They offer long warranties. One of them built its whole reputation on a warranty that stretches to 7 years, and when a car maker is willing to stand behind its own product for 7 years, that tells you something about how confident they are that it won't break. In the owner satisfaction surveys I mentioned, these brands now regularly beat the prestige names that cost 3 times as much. For a careful buyer on a budget, a long, unexpired warranty is like a shield, and I don't want you to underestimate it. But the top of my list, the brands I would trust with my own retirement, come from one clear tradition: Japanese engineering built for the long haul. At or near the summit sits the brand almost every mechanic quietly recommends when the customer isn't a salesman's target anymore. You know the one whose four-cylinder engines routinely pass 300,000 kilometers with basic servicing, the one whose hybrid system, now more than 2 decades on the road, has proven so durable that taxi and rideshare drivers rack up absurd distances on the original battery packs. In survey after survey, in country after country, this brand sits at or near the top for dependability, and it earned that the hard way, over decades, by being almost boringly consistent. It doesn't dazzle you in the showroom. It just refuses to die. Right beside it, I put another Japanese maker, smaller, known for cars that are a genuine pleasure to drive, that have kept real buttons and dials far longer than most, and that owners in this country rate extraordinarily highly for satisfaction. And I have a soft spot for one more Japanese brand that specializes in small, light, simple cars, the kind with modest engines and uncomplicated gearboxes that sip fuel and almost never let you down, and cost very little to fix on the rare occasion they need it. For a lot of seniors who mostly drive around town, that kind of small, honest car is the smartest buy on the road, and it barely gets a mention in the flashy advertising precisely because there's not much profit in simplicity. So, that's the shape of it. Prestige and rugged badges at the bottom, troubled gearboxes in the lower middle, rising Korean value with strong warranties in the middle, and proven Japanese durability at the top. But a ranking of brands is only half the answer, and honestly, it's the less useful half, because within almost every single one of those brands, there are good cars and bad cars sitting side by side on the same lot. And the difference between them comes down to the secret I dug all the way to the bottom to find. Here it is. The single most important reliability decision you will make is not the badge on the bonnet, it is what's underneath. Specifically, it is choosing a naturally aspirated engine paired with a conventional torque converter automatic gearbox and steering clear of small turbocharged engines bolted to dual clutch or CVT gearboxes. Let me unpack that in plain language, because this is the knowledge that was quietly taken from ordinary buyers, and I want to hand it back to you properly. Naturally aspirated simply means the engine breathes on its own, without a turbocharger forcing extra air into it. A turbocharger is a little device that spins at enormous speed and enormous heat to squeeze more power and better economy out of a smaller engine. It works, but it's another complex, hot, hard-working part that can fail expensively, and small turbo engines tend to be worked harder over their lives. A larger engine without a turbo, doing the same job more gently, is under less stress. Less stress means longer life. It's the same reason a horse that trots all day outlasts one that gallops, and the gearbox, as you now know, is everything. A torque converter automatic is the old, proven, forgiving design. A dual clutch is the one that tore apart the trust of tens of thousands of owners in that federal court saga. A CVT can be fine in some brands and a weak point in others, and it often feels strange to drive, droning like a slipping clutch even when nothing's wrong. So, how do you actually use this, standing in a car yard with no mechanic beside you and no way to open up the gearbox? This is the part I'm proudest of, because it's so simple. First, you ask one direct question, and you watch the salesman's face. Ask, is this a turbo engine or naturally aspirated, and what kind of automatic gearbox does it have? A confident, honest answer is a good sign. Fumbling, or steering you back to the touchscreen, tells you plenty. Second, you can often read it yourself. On the engine or in the specifications, a small turbo petrol engine is frequently badged with a T, or described with words like turbo or a tiny engine size, making surprisingly high power. That combination, tiny engine, big power, is your quiet warning. For the gearbox, you look up the model, and if the words dual clutch, DSG, power shift, or twin clutch appear, you slow right down and research that exact model's history. If it says CVT, you check whether that particular brand's CVT has a good record, because some do and some don't. And if it's a plain conventional automatic, often with a stated number of speeds and no fancy name, you can breathe easier. Third, and this is the freshest, most practical thing I can give you. Take your phone, or ask a grandchild to help, and type the exact model and year followed by the words common problems and the word transmission. The forums where real owners gather, the same kind of frank, unpaid, plain-speaking places where I did much of my digging, will tell you within minutes whether that specific car has a reputation for gearbox trouble. Real owners do not lie about being stranded. 15 minutes of that reading has saved people I care about many thousands of dollars. And there's a beautiful bonus buried in this rule. The cars that follow it, naturally aspirated engine, conventional automatic physical buttons, are almost always the plainer, cheaper, less advertised models. So, the safest, most reliable choice is frequently also the most affordable one. The industry spends its advertising money pushing you toward the complex, profitable, fragile machines, and the humble, dependable ones sit quietly at the edge of the lot with a smaller price tag and a longer life ahead of them. Once you know that, you can never quite unknow it, and you'll never look at a car commercial the same way again. I want to give you one more layer to protect yourself, because reliability isn't only about what you buy, it's about proof you can check. Before you commit to any used car, ask for the service history and check whether the model was ever part of a safety recall. Australia had a mandatory recall over faulty airbags that became the largest automotive recall in this nation's history, affecting millions of vehicles, and you can check any car's recall status for free using its registration or identification number through the government's recall service. It takes 2 minutes. A car with unfinished recall work is a car someone hasn't been caring for, and that neglect usually runs deeper than one part. Put it all together, and the fog lifts. The brand matters, and I've ranked them honestly for you, worst to best, with the Japanese stalwarts on top and the prestige troublemakers at the bottom. But the deeper truth, the one that survives no matter which yard you walk into, is that a plain engine and a plain gearbox from a brand that stands behind its work will outlast a fancy badge every single time. That's the whole secret. It was never complicated. It was just never explained to you, because a well-informed buyer is far harder to sell an expensive mistake to. What I really recovered digging through those court records and owner forums and satisfaction surveys wasn't a list of brands. It was the plain confidence to walk into a showroom and not be handled, to know that the quiet, boring, dependable choice was the smart one all along, and that the shiny screen and the tiny turbo were never built for someone like me or like you. You are not too old to make a sharp decision, and you are certainly not too old to refuse to be taken for a ride. That instinct in your gut, the one that made you cautious in the first place, was right. Now it's backed by evidence. So let me ask you something, and I genuinely want your answer. Have you ever owned a car with one of those troublesome dual clutch or CVT gearboxes, the kind that shuddered or lost drive on you, and what brand was it? Tell me in the comments below, because your story might be the exact warning that saves the next person reading. I read them, and this audience of ours knows more collectively than any survey. If you've ever felt outmatched walking into a dealership or been burned by a repair bill that felt like a trap, come join us. This little community is quietly recovering the practical know-how that used to be passed down and somehow stopped being told, the kind of knowledge that keeps you independent and keeps your money in your own pocket. Subscribe and stay with me, because next time I'm pulling the thread on something just as costly. I've been digging into which everyday car repairs the dealers charge a fortune for that you can arrange yourself for a fraction of the price, and one of them is a part almost every car needs replaced that costs pennies but gets billed like gold. I found where the markup hides, and I can't wait to show you. I'm still here because you want proof. Inside my membership, the Wise Living Circle, you get the full brand ranking with every model's service data, picking up right where we just stopped. Ask me your own question about your own car, and a real person answers. Me, myself. You're not alone. Practical seniors like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel any time. One click. No risk.